For 2 years my daughter's laughter was a ghost in our silent house, a sound locked away until a quiet housekeeper arrived, whose touch promised a peculiar kind of magic. My house is a museum of silence. You can hear everything. The groan of the old wood floors, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the solemn tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. But the one sound you'll never hear, the sound a house with a 7-year-old girl should be full of, is laughter. My daughter, Lily, does not laugh. She doesn't even smile. It wasn't always this way. I have photographs, so many photographs, of a time before. A time when her giggles were like wind chimes in a summer breeze. A time when her smile could light up a room and chase away any shadow. That was when her mother, Eleanor, was still with us. But the accident that took Eleanor 2 years ago didn't just steal my wife, it stole my daughter's joy. It locked it away in a vault so deep no one had been able to find the key. I'd tried everything, believe me. I poured my fortune into finding that key. Top child psychologists who spoke in hushed, sympathetic tones, therapists who brought puppets and sand trays. I even, in a moment of sheer desperation, hired a private clown who was supposedly the child whisperer. Lily just stared at his painted smile with her big, empty eyes, her own face a perfect porcelain mask. We'd been to Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, and she'd watched the fireworks display with the same detached curiosity she'd show a documentary about insects. Nothing worked. Nothing broke through. My life became a quiet, orderly mission to care for this beautiful, hollow shell of my daughter. And a big part of that was keeping the house running, which meant a revolving door of nannies and housekeepers. Most didn't last more than a month. They couldn't stand the quiet. They'd try to coax a smile out of Lily with loud voices and bright toys, and when they were met with her unwavering silence, they'd grow unnerved. One of them told me the house felt haunted. I didn't have the heart to tell her it was. Haunted by a sound that was no longer there. That's why, when Clara came for the interview, I was already prepared for disappointment. She was older than the others, maybe in her late 50s, with lines etched around her eyes that spoke of a hard life, not a cheerful one. She didn't have a bubbly personality or a resume filled with child development courses. She was just a woman who needed a job. "I'm not a miracle worker, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice soft but steady. She wasn't looking at me, but at a photo of Eleanor and a laughing Lily on the mantelpiece. "I clean, I cook, I can be quiet. That's what the agency said you needed. Someone quiet." Something in her directness, her lack of false promises, made me hire her on the spot. I was tired of false hope. Quiet was something I understood. Clara started the next Monday, and she was true to her word. She moved through the house like a ghost, a silent, efficient presence. The scent of lemon polish replaced the stale air of grief, but the silence remained. The only difference was that Clara didn't try to fight it. She didn't pester Lily. She'd simply talk to her as if she expected no reply. "I'm going to dust the living room now, Lily," she'd say in her calm, even tone. "The dust bunnies are having a party under the sofa, and they weren't invited." She'd talk to the plants while she watered them, telling them to stand up straight. She'd hum tuneless, wordless melodies while she folded laundry. Lily, in her usual way, ignored her. She'd sit in the big armchair by the window, clutching the worn-out stuffed elephant Eleanor had given her, and watch the world go by. But after a week, I noticed something, a subtle shift. When Clara was in a room, Lily's gaze would drift from the window and follow her. She wasn't engaging, not really, but she was observing. It was the most interest she'd shown in another human being in 2 years. It was a crumb, but I was starving, so I clung to it. Then came the day that changed everything. I was in my home office trying to concentrate on a spreadsheet, but the numbers were just swimming in front of my eyes. The house was even quieter than usual. The ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to have slowed down, each talk a heavy, leaden weight. I realized I couldn't hear Clara humming or the soft swish of her cleaning cloth. I felt a prickle of unease. I got up and walked quietly down the hall. The door to the living room was slightly ajar. I peered through the crack, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. What I saw made me freeze. Lily was not in her armchair. She was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, her stuffed elephant in her lap. And in front of her, also on the floor, was Clara. There were no toys between them, no books, no bright, colorful objects. Clara was just sitting there, her back to me, her hands in her lap. She was perfectly still. And then I saw it. Her hand, her right hand, began to move. It wasn't a wave or a gesture. It was something else entirely, something unnatural. Her thumb bent backwards, slowly, impossibly, until it touched the top of her wrist. Then her fingers began to ripple, moving in a fluid serpentine wave, as if they had no bones at all. They coiled and uncoiled in a silent, mesmerizing dance. I felt my breath catch in my throat. It was bizarre, almost grotesque, but I couldn't look away. Lily was transfixed. Her eyes, usually so vacant, were wide with a look I hadn't seen in years. Utter, absolute fascination. A tiny gasp escaped her lips, a sound so small I almost missed it. Clara must have heard it too. She stopped the strange movement of her hand and slowly turned her head. Her eyes met mine through the crack in the door. The gentle, calm expression on her face vanished, replaced instantly by a look of pure, stark terror. It was the look of someone with a profound secret who had just been caught. For a long moment, the three of us were trapped in a tableau of shock. Me, half hidden in the doorway, my mind refusing to process what my eyes had just seen. Clara, on the floor, her face a mask of primal fear, clutching her right hand to her chest as if it were a wounded bird. And Lily, her small face tilted up towards Clara, the faintest glimmer of curiosity still lingering in her empty eyes before it was snuffed out, like a candle in a draught. The silence that rushed back in was heavier, more suffocating than before. Clara scrambled to her feet with an agility that surprised me. "Mr. Henderson," she stammered, her voice a strained whisper. "I was just playing a game. A silly little finger game." She wouldn't meet my gaze, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. I stepped fully into the room, closing the door softly behind me. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but I forced my voice to remain calm, level. "Clara," I said, my eyes fixed on the hand she was hiding. "What was that?" "Nothing, sir. A cramp. I have arthritis, sometimes my fingers. They seize up." The lie was clumsy, pathetic. Arthritis doesn't make your thumb touch your wrist. It doesn't make your fingers flow like water. I took a step closer. Lily hadn't moved. She was watching me now, her expression unreadable, but she was watching. She was present. "Don't lie to me," I said, keeping my voice low so as not to startle my daughter. "Please. For 2 years my daughter has been a ghost in this house. For 2 years I have watched her fade away. Just now for about 30 seconds I saw a flicker of the little girl I lost. She was looking at you. She was fascinated by whatever it is you were doing. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. She shook her head, a torrent of unspoken fear and desperation in the gesture. "You don't understand. I have to go. I can't work here anymore. Please, just let me get my things." She started to move towards the door, but I gently blocked her path. "No," I said, my own desperation leaking into my voice. "You can't go. Whatever that was, I don't care if it's a magic trick or something else. It reached her. Do you understand what that means? Nothing has reached her. You'll tell people," she whispered, her body trembling. "They'll think I'm a freak. A monster." "Who would I tell?" I asked, a bitter laugh almost escaping my lips. "The doctors who failed her? The therapists who took my money and gave me nothing but pitying looks? Clara, I am not your enemy. I am just a father who wants to hear his daughter laugh again. Whatever your secret is, it is safe in this house. I swear it." I looked past her to Lily, who was now looking from my face to Clara's, her little head turning back and forth. She was following our conversation. My breath hitched. This was more engagement than I'd seen from her in months. I had to take this chance. "Show me," I said softly to Clara. "Show me what you did, so I can understand." She stared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked at my pleading eyes, then at Lily's silent, watchful ones. The terror in her expression slowly receded, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking weariness. It was the look of someone who had been running her entire life and had finally run out of road. With a shuddering sigh, she finally nodded. She didn't sit back on the floor. Instead, she walked over to the grand fireplace, to the heavy, ornate mantel clock that had been in my family for generations. The clock that Eleanor had always loved. It had stopped working the day of the accident. The hands were frozen at 3:17 p.m. I'd never had the heart to fix it. It felt fitting, somehow. A monument to the moment our own world had stopped turning. Clara stood before it, her back to me once more. She slowly raised her right hand, the one I'd seen before. "It's not just my hands, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice barely audible. "I've always been different." She didn't touch the clock. She held her hand about a foot away from its glass face. The room was so quiet I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. She closed her eyes. I watched, mesmerized, as she splayed her fingers, not in the impossible way she had for Lily, but in a gesture of concentration, as if she were a conductor commanding an orchestra. Nothing happened. For a long, tense moment, there was only the suffocating silence. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. Maybe I had imagined it all. Maybe I was so desperate for a sign that my mind had invented one. And then I heard it. A faint, metallic click. My eyes shot to the clock face. The long, silent second hand, frozen for 2 years at the number 12, twitched. It moved. Click. It moved again. Click. 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 It began to sweep around the dial, slow and steady, as if waking from a long sleep. My jaw went slack. It was impossible. The clock wasn't wound. It had no batteries. It was a beautiful, broken machine. Clara took a deep breath, and a bead of sweat trickled down her temple. Her hand trembled with the effort. "Watch," she whispered. The second hand completed its circuit. Then the minute hand shuddered and creaked forward 1 notch, from 17 minutes past to 18. The clock was working. Clara was making it work with her mind, with some unseen force that flowed from her fingertips. It was real. It was all real. A dizzying, terrifying hope bloomed in my chest. If she could do this, if she could mend what was broken without even touching it, what else could she do? Could she reach into my daughter's silent world and rewind the damage? As if she'd heard my thoughts, Clara's fingers tensed. The rhythmic ticking of the clock faltered. It stopped. Then, with a groan of protesting gears that echoed in the silent room, the minute hand began to move again. Not forward. It was moving backward, first slowly, then faster and faster, spinning counterclockwise, erasing the minutes. The hands of the clock were flying in reverse, undoing time itself right before my eyes. The sight was so fundamentally wrong, so contrary to every law of physics I knew, that my mind reeled. The hands of the clock spun backward, a frantic, silent blur. It was like watching a film in reverse, a moment of our family's history being visibly, tangibly unwound. Clara's breathing was ragged now, her face pale with strain. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with a strange electric hum that seemed to vibrate in my bones. "Clara, stop," I said, my voice hoarse. It was too much. This wasn't some harmless party trick with her fingers. This was a violation of nature. She didn't seem to hear me. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her entire being focused on the clock. The hand spun faster and faster, a whirlwind of brass against the porcelain face, until, with a final, jarring thud, they stopped. They were back where they had started, frozen. 3:17 p.m. Clara slumped against the mantelpiece, panting, her arm dropping limply to her side. The unnatural energy in the room dissipated, leaving behind a silence that felt even more profound. I rushed to her side, grabbing her arm to steady her. "Are you all right?" She nodded weakly, leaning her head against the cool marble. "It takes a lot out of me," she gasped. "I haven't done something that big in a long time." I looked from her exhausted face to the clock, then to my daughter. Lily was no longer on the floor. She had crept closer. She stood only a few feet away, her worn-out elephant clutched to her chest, her eyes wide as saucers. They weren't empty anymore. They were filled with a potent mixture of awe and confusion. She took another hesitant step forward and reached out a tiny hand, not to touch Clara, but to touch the air where that strange energy had been. as if she could still feel its ghost. "What are you?" I whispered to Clara, my voice full of a reverence that bordered on fear. Clara finally straightened up, pushing herself away from the mantelpiece. She looked at Lily, a deep, sorrowful kindness in her gaze. "My mother called it the touch," she said quietly. "My grandmother had it too. We can influence things, nudge them. Old things, broken things are easiest. Things with a history, with memories." She finally looked at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. "Like your clock. It didn't want to be broken, Mr. Henderson. It wanted to tick again. I just gave it a push." "And your hand?" I asked, remembering the impossible, boneless motion that had started all of this. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "That's just for show. For children. A little bit of strangeness to get their attention. A key to open a locked door." She glanced at Lily. "Sometimes when the world outside is too loud and scary, children lock themselves away. They need to see a bit of magic to remember that the world can be wonderful too." The pieces began to click into place. Clara hadn't come here just for a job. The agency had told her about Lily, about a quiet house with a sad little girl, and she had come, hoping her touch, her magic, could do what doctors and clowns could not. Over the next few days, a new, tentative rhythm established itself in our silent house. Clara never performed another grand display like she had with the clock. Instead, her magic was woven into the fabric of our everyday lives, in small, subtle wonders meant only for Lily's eyes. One afternoon, I watched from the hallway as Lily sat at the kitchen table, pushing a single pea around her plate. Clara was at the sink, humming her tuneless melody. Without turning around, without a word, one of Lily's wooden building blocks on the other side of the table wobbled. It lifted an inch into the air, hovered for a moment, and then gently set itself down on top of another block. Lily's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She stared at the blocks. Another one lifted and placed itself on the stack. Soon, a small wobbly tower was building itself, block by silent block, an impossible construction project orchestrated by a woman who wasn't even looking. Lily didn't smile, but she ate her peas. Another time, Clara was mending Lily's stuffed elephant, where a seam had come undone. As she worked the needle and thread, she began telling a story about a brave elephant who could fly using his big ears. As she spoke, she held the stuffed animal up, and for a breathtaking second, its floppy cloth ears fluttered, lifting on an invisible breeze inside the still room. Lily's eyes followed the movement, her lips parting slightly. These were her secrets, shared in whispers, in fleeting moments of impossibility. She was showing Lily a world that didn't run on the rigid, cruel rules that had taken her mother. She was showing her a world where toys could move on their own, where elephants could almost fly, where broken things could be made whole. She was coaxing my daughter out of her shell, not with loud noises or demands, but with quiet wonder. And Lily was responding. She started following Clara from room to room, a silent little shadow. She would sit and watch Clara fold laundry for an hour, her gaze intent, as if waiting for a stray sock to float through the air. The porcelain mask of her face was softening. There was curiosity there now, expectation, hope. I began to feel it too, a dangerous, fragile hope that I tried to keep locked down, terrified that it would be shattered. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel like I was living in a museum. It felt like a home again, waiting to be woken up. One rainy Saturday, I found them in the living room. Clara was sitting on the floor, and Lily was sitting close by, closer than I'd ever seen her willingly sit next to anyone. Between them was a small dead sparrow that must have hit the window pane. Lily was staring at it, her expression somber. My heart sank. This was exactly the kind of harsh reality I'd tried to shield her from. "It's okay, little one," Clara was saying softly. "Sometimes things get broken. Sometimes they stop." Lily looked from the bird to Clara, a question in her eyes. It was the first time I'd ever seen her ask for something without words. She was asking Clara to fix it, to use her magic, her touch, to make the bird fly again. Clara's face was filled with a gentle sadness. "My touch is for things, Lily," she said, her voice a low murmur. "Things made of wood and metal and thread, not for living creatures. I can't fix this. I can't bring back what's gone. I saw the light in Lily's eyes begin to dim, the familiar emptiness creeping back in. The magic was failing. The real world, cruel and unyielding, was reasserting its power. But then Clara took a deep breath. She looked at the dead bird in her hand, then at Lily's crestfallen face. A look of fierce, loving determination came over her. "But," she said, her voice suddenly stronger, maybe I can share a secret, a different kind of secret." She cradled the little bird in her cupped hands, holding it gently. She closed her eyes, and I saw her lips move, whispering words too quiet for me to hear. A strange, pale light, like faint moonlight, began to glow between her fingers. It pulsed softly, bathing the bird, her hands, and Lily's transfixed face in its ethereal luminescence. It was nothing like the crackling energy of the clock. This was something else, something older, deeper, and far more dangerous. The light grew brighter, and I felt a sudden, sharp cold sweep through the room. Clara's face was now ashen, beads of sweat on her forehead despite the chill. This was costing her more than just energy. This was costing her a piece of herself. The light pulsed one last time, brilliantly, and then vanished. Clara opened her eyes and exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that looked painful. She slowly, tenderly opened her hands. The little sparrow lay on her palm. It was still, unmoving. It hadn't worked. And then its head twitched. My breath caught in my throat. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but in the profound stillness of the room, it was like a thunderclap. Lily let out a small, sharp gasp, her first vocalization in 2 years that wasn't a cry in her sleep. She leaned forward, her small hands gripping the edge of the rug, her eyes fixed on the sparrow. The bird's chest rose and fell in a shallow, hesitant breath. Its eyelids fluttered open, revealing 2 tiny black beads that blinked in the soft light of the room. It shifted its weight, its minuscule claws scratching against Clara's palm. It was alive. The impossible had happened. Clara hadn't just mended a broken thing, she had rekindled a life, but the cost was terrifyingly clear. Clara looked utterly depleted, her skin the color of ash. A thin trickle of blood crept from one of her nostrils. She saw me watching, my face a mess of terror and awe, and gave a weak, dismissive shake of her head, a silent plea for me not to say anything, not to break the spell. With a final, gentle nudge from her finger, the sparrow, now fully alert, chirped once. It was a weak, reedy sound, but it was the sound of life. It ruffled its feathers, tested its wings with a little flutter, and then, with a push from its tiny legs, it launched itself from Clara's hand. It flew, not strongly, but with a determined wobble, across the living room and landed on the windowsill. It paused, chirped again as if in thanks, and then disappeared into the rain-soaked garden. The room was silent again, but this was a different silence. It was the quiet after a storm, filled with the scent of ozone and possibility. And then it happened. It started as a small tremor in Lily's shoulders. A strange, unfamiliar sound bubbled up from her chest, a sound I hadn't heard in an eternity. It was a tiny, hiccuping giggle. It was rusty, unused, like an old engine struggling to turn over. She looked at Clara, at the spot on the windowsill where the bird had been, and the sound came again, stronger this time. A giggle became a chuckle, a pure, clear sound that sliced through the grief-soaked air of the house. She threw her head back, and a laugh, a real, full-throated, joyous laugh erupted from her. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was water in the desert, sunshine after a flood. It was the sound of my daughter coming back to me, the sound of our broken world beginning to mend. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unchecked. I stumbled forward and knelt on the floor, pulling my laughing, crying daughter into my arms. She hugged me back, her small arms wrapped tightly around my neck, her laughter still bubbling up between sobs, a strange and wonderful symphony of joy and released sorrow. Over her shoulder I looked at Clara. She was smiling, a genuine, radiant smile that transformed her tired face. But the effort of her miracle and the relief of its success was too much. Her smile faltered, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed onto the floor in a dead faint. The next few hours were a blur. I got Clara onto the sofa, cleaned the blood from her face with a damp cloth, and sat with her, holding her hand while Lily, who refused to leave her side, curled up at the other end of the couch, fast asleep, clutching her elephant with a small, contented smile on her lips. When Clara finally woke, the evening light was fading. Her first words were a whispered, "Is she—" "She's okay," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You did it, Clara. You brought her back." Clara looked at the sleeping form of my daughter, and the tears that had been absent before now filled her eyes. "That last secret," she said, her voice weak, "the one for living things. I promised myself I would never use it again. It takes too much. It shortens your own time." A cold dread washed over me. "What do you mean?" "The touch is a give and take, Mr. Henderson. To mend a clock, you give energy. To mend a life, you have to give a piece of your own." She looked down at her hands, then back at me. "My husband, he was very sick. I tried to fix him, again and again. It wasn't enough to save him, but it was enough to break me. I swore I would never pay that price again. But when I saw the look on her face, I couldn't let her believe the world had no magic left. In that moment I understood everything. This quiet, unassuming woman was no mere housekeeper. She was a guardian of small wonders, a woman who carried a gift that was both a miracle and a curse. She had come to my house not just for a job, but on a mission, and she had been willing to sacrifice a piece of herself to complete it. I didn't need a miracle worker anymore. I needed a friend. I needed family. Clara stayed, not as our maid, but as part of our lives. The silence in our house was replaced by sound. Lily's laughter became a daily occurrence. Her voice, once a forgotten memory, filled the rooms with questions and stories and songs. She and Clara were inseparable, partners in a world of quiet magic. I'd find them in the garden, whispering to the roses to encourage them to bloom, or in the kitchen, nudging the last few drops of honey out of the jar with a shared look of concentration. Clara never performed another miracle on the scale of the sparrow, but her touch was everywhere in the small, inexplicable wonders that made our house a home again. My daughter still doesn't laugh at knock-knock jokes, and she finds clowns unsettling. Her joy isn't found in the loud, manufactured happiness of the outside world. It's found in the quiet magic she shares with Clara. It's in watching a wilting flower stand up straight, or seeing a lost button roll out from under the sofa exactly when it's needed. It's in knowing that the world operates on more than just the rules of logic and physics, that even after the deepest loss, there is still room for wonder. Clara didn't just teach my daughter how to laugh again. She gave her an unexpected secret to believe in, and in doing so, she didn't just fix my daughter. She healed our entire family.